It's very normal to fall in love with someone who you're confessing or confiding all of your secrets, your traumas, your feelings about XYZ. So the idea that falling in love with a therapist, a coach, where you're actually having emotional intimacy that you may not have had with your family, you may not have had with friends, of course you're going to feel love for somebody who is receiving all of these confessions, confidings, knowing your trauma, knowing your secrets. Of course there's a natural love for the person that's holding your vulnerability. There's this weird idea that for one, we already have a lot of stigma with vulnerability and emotion and emotional intimacy. There's the idea of parents, they provide your physical needs, but there's not necessarily that emotional intimacy of connecting with you, wanting to understand you. And so when you go to a therapist, there's this same idea that's well, this is a container for you to be emotionally intimate, but be sure not to develop feelings because you've got to keep that compartmentalized. You've got to have boundaries. And I think it's a very strange, it actually reinforces the idea that expressing emotions are not something that is, you have to really repress some of the emotions that come up. It keeps this kind of link of, have a transactional view of people, this person's for sex, this person's for your emotions. Don't tell your partner things, go to your therapist. And then if you develop feelings for your therapist, then that's a problem that you've got to work out because that's your problem. The way that we talk about these things is so counterintuitive because it's pretty natural if you've craved being seen and understood and you're having someone that you're confessing things to, that you would develop feelings for them, and even them developing feelings for you because they know your vulnerabilities and they've gotten to know you in a way that both people may not get to know others in other circumstances. And even in and I mean this with any circumstance where you're able to just show a side of yourself that you're not able to, with workplace people where you have a mask, with family where you have a particular role that people see you in and it's kind of hard to get out of. Of course, if you have a therapist or coach that knows more, there's going to be some feelings. To pretend developing them is another problem that you have to be fixed is actually, I think that's kind of ignorant. It's missing the point. And I think that there's also something very insidious about, this is going away from but I think there's something insidious about even how psychotherapists and therapists, they focus a lot on, this is the childhood wound that we're going to then, you're going to be victimized by your parents and blame them. And then there is a subtle switch to then their daddy, their mommy. It's completely what's happening because they are in a way isolating you from your family, looking at them with a new eye that they're people to blame and you're a victim of them. And then all of a sudden they're this source of, well, I will tell you, I will have the authority to tell you how to live and what to think, how to frame this story, which they have essentially become new parents. And if you have studied cults, they have a ritual way of killing off the parents, isolating the people, and then they're all in this new family now. And I'm not saying that this is again, this might be all operating unconsciously, but there is something kind of disturbing, and there is something to be aware of, because when you make this, when you see, like when you're a kid, your parents were your authority of how to frame things. Like they would say, you know, you'd get hurt and they'd say you're not hurt or whatever. They might invalidate your feeling, and then that made you invalidate yourself, for example. But then now say you have your therapist. They're telling you, they're framing events that they weren't there. They can't speculate on what a parent's intent or what the parent's trauma is, but they tend to have this, like, they look for a way to frame it that, okay, now you're the victim of the parent and it's time to blame them. And maybe not. Of course, they might look into both sides of it and how you made meaning as a kid of this and that. But like, let's just realize that they're telling you they're having this kind of authority. They're telling you how to frame something, and then they're in a way isolating you from trusting the family as authority, and now they're the authority. So then you're thinking, well, they have the secret sauce knowledge, so they're daddy, they're mommy. And I think there's something very dangerous in that, and you've got to be aware of that, because look at how cults run. Look at how there is that, they take advantage of the confiding in a therapist, feeling the sexual feelings because you have emotional intimacy, because women feel attracted sexually once they have emotional intimacy, and men feel attracted to vulnerability, and a woman who has that, who activates that hero instinct where he can be like her hero or savior. So it's a natural thing that's happening, and it happens women to women too. So be aware of how that like, I'm not saying that it's not valid to be looking at your childhood and noticing, oh, I made meaning of this, and then and to have that conversation. I'm just saying that conversation in itself can be completely weaponized, and it is in cults. Like the Keith Raniere Nexium cult, he drew people in with the really nurturing, warm, sweet voice of you talking about your traumas and confessions. And this is how Scientology, they get confessions, trauma. It's basically like giving them the manual for how to trigger you, how to activate you, and how to love you. So they have a lot of power. And then that is weaponized. It can be used for good, but it can also, it's so powerful for someone to know exactly how to control you that suddenly you've got women that you're branding, and you're in a Nexium cult, and you've isolated people from their families, and they're all your slaves. So you just got to be aware of all of that. It's even just like, I've been to somatic retreats, and there's actually this kind of emphasis of, there is an actual, like, they want you to kill your parents. Like, that's how abusers work too. They want to get you away from that influence, and then they want to replace that influence with them. They want to be daddy. Government does this. It's like, I'm daddy government. You just need to trust me. Trust in the science. Religion does this. God is daddy. Like, it's like a really kind of creepy thing to get mommy and daddy as the authority, and that's why you look at all the orphaned people that go to Hollywood to then get the audience approval, and they encounter so many abusive handlers that they're seeking somebody that gives that they can trust that person as an authority. It's like, no, the best sign of a person who is a therapist, a coach, is that they encourage you to develop self-trust, that they encourage you to not take on their frame and their particular view of the world, but they want you to trust yourself and your own instincts, and not to be constantly outsourcing your authority to them, to parents, to anyone, but to kind of develop that level of autonomy. I think that's a huge green flag. And I think that I think that there needs to be more discussions on how it's natural to have like this idea that we have this word transference for liking, and we make it so clinical. It's like, it's pretty simple. A woman's sex drive is driven by emotional intimacy. The person she's probably most emotionally intimate with in her life is somebody, and who's listening, is a therapist. They're listening to all her vulnerabilities, her wounds, her confessions, her secrets. So of course, having that's going to drive she's going to be seduced by that, and she's going to be attractive. Duh. It's not like, oh, it's this fancy thing, transference. It's so interesting the way we have this, like, we cloak it all in all these words. And then, of course, the therapist is often somebody that desperately wants to be a savior, hero, and feel this really like warm tide of how they're helping people and they're getting people to expose their vulnerabilities, and they feel powerful. What a power trip of that. So the two things, it's like it's so natural for there to be feelings. It's and same with the mom. Same with having mommy therapist. It's like you're telling a woman about your problems with your mother, for instance, and then all of a sudden she becomes mommy. So it's to act as though to make people wrong for developing feelings for people in these kind of therapeutic roles, I think is very short-sighted, because I think it's very natural, and we should realize that, and then on the top of that, we should realize how that therapist can become a replacement for our family figures and whatever our family figures didn't provide. The emotional intimacy of this person seems very appealing, but we've got to watch out for when that can get exploited and weaponized, used against us to manipulate us, because that's what happens with so many cults. Is it's like the cult leader is like a therapist figure that's giving them a frame on reality, and they're outsourcing that, and they're just trusting in daddy, mommy, and that's how it happens. So we really got to have more conversations like this, I think. So hope this was helpful.